Hey everyone, and welcome. We're going to give it a minute or so while people start rolling in. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. It is freezing today in Joburg, but I speak for myself. I can't speak for Rory and his climate-controlled environment. The session is going to be really fun and informative, so feel free to jump in and leave us a comment, leave us a question. We really are so thrilled to have you guys here. So we will get going in about 2 minutes or so. Just going to give everyone a chance to get started and get logging in. But welcome to the session of the Speakers Forge. As always, all our sessions are recorded. If you have a question, leave a question in the question section or a comment or a query. We will be sharing this live afterwards with our YouTube page and also on the various social pages. And I'll also link to Rory and Kurt's awesome profiles. Go and check them out. There's some really cool stuff. I really enjoy Kurt's blogs, and I know Rory is the king of Twitter, so highly recommended that you jump on there. Today's session is going to be a bit of an interesting one for us. We will be doing a discussion all around leadership, and I'm very keen to hear from Kurt as to why leadership is for suckers and what that entails for us. And then we will hand over through to Rory, who's going to give us a demo on some interesting Azure Spring Cloud stuff and hopefully teach me a few things about it as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kurt. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you guys at the end of the questions. Welcome, Kurt. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. How's it, everyone? I'm Kurt, and I am CTO at Snapscan. Just give me 1 second while I set up my screen share. Right. Okay. All right, as you can see in my background, I have a super professional setup consisting of a bed. All right, so leadership is for suckers, a dummy's guide to becoming a leader. Who is Kurt? So I had a bit of an existential crisis drawing up this slide. I am getting on in years. So in 1989, I was 6 at the time. My parents bought us a ZX Spectrum 48K, and they thought it would be a great tool for education. It turns out it wasn't really. So my brother and I would spend our time scouring CNA for like bargain bin game demo tapes because it used normal tapes to actually store stuff. So my parents were wrong, but they were also kind of right because, I mean, I did end up in IT after all. Then in 1993, we upgraded to a 386DX40 for school projects. Up until that point, we just used an old typewriter. So this was definitely an upgrade. But again, my brother and I spent our time playing games and later making games. And then in 1977, my brother went to UCT and he kind of became my conduit to all things web related. And so he would go off to varsity, come back a month later, and he would bring back a bunch of disks just loaded with downloaded programming websites and blogs because things like Stack Overflow didn't really exist then. And then in 2003, so I was studying at UCT at the time, I got my first dev job at the UCT ICT incubator. And that was pretty cool because it was my first foray into commercial dev. We did some dev for the Coke company, some pension funds, and also that's where I met Lungi from Yoko. And this factors into my story later. So 18 years later, I'm still alive, just a little bit older. So I am a sucker, and I'll explain why. So I was told for the first 8 years of my career that managers have an easy job because they always have minions to do the easy stuff. I was told that managers make the most money, and because if somebody reports to you, they should earn less than you, obviously. And I was also told that management is the only secure job once you hit 30. No one really wants to work with older people, right? And all of this was kind of reinforced because the manager that was working with us at the UCT incubator drove a Porsche and wore tailored suits. So I figured, okay, and once you get to management, you have an easy path to life. But even worse than all of this, I told myself that I didn't care enough about people to want to manage them. So in hindsight, like looking back at my last 7 years, this is obviously false. It took me 4 bad jobs, 4 bad managers to realize that I cared deeply about my teams and what they were doing. And that's when I knew that I had to kind of change focus. Being a young, at the time, person of color meant that I was trying to reboot my career, and it wasn't easy, but that's a talk for a different day. So for the last 7 years, I've been in various leadership roles at some fairly prominent startups. You might have heard of some of them. There was Yoko, there was Jumo, there was Cape. I seem to like startups with 4 letters in their name. Cape was later acquired by HPE. And again, I'll get into that story a bit later. And now I'm at Snapscan. Now, each one of these has posed very unique challenges, and I've learned some very painful lessons, but I've also met some amazing people along the way. And hopefully my story will translate into something useful that you can use to decide whether management is for you, or whether you want to take that step up, or even just better relate to your current lead. Now, I think the best place to start when talking about tech leadership is, what does the tech leadership landscape actually look like? Because a tech lead is a team lead, is a dev management lead, right? Or is it? So please pardon the bad jokes. I am a dad, so I hope I get a pass for that. So the answer is not quite. So engineering leadership titles in general are an absolute mess. But the 2 things you can count on is that team lead and tech lead are the foundational roles. So team leads typically split their time between alignment and line management and dev work, and where you are, that split might look very different. Alignment in this case means making sure that your team and other teams that interface with your team are aligned on their goals and the direction that everybody needs to move in. Tech leads, on the other hand, typically split their time between dev work and like large-scale technical decisions that affect multiple teams. They might lead their own teams too, but that's generally only at the more senior levels, at least that I've found. That being said, it's not uncommon for these 2 roles to work together. So in this case, the tech lead will focus on the technical direction, whereas the team lead will focus on alignment. It's at the more senior levels where things get a little more murky. So how does a VP of engineering differ from a head of engineering? And what about the director of engineering? Some people say that it's dependent on the market. So in South Africa, it might be different compared to the US, compared to the EU. I've seen and worked with all of these leads locally, sometimes all within the same company, and it's never really clear what everyone's delineated role actually is. So sometimes it's just because people like titles, and hiring managers, in their eagerness to sign people, will give them that title. And again, look, there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting a title. A title is sometimes necessary to kind of reestablish your self-esteem and self-worth, but often it's because a company just hasn't given enough thought as to the scope of the actual roles. And so if this is your company and there's no clear distinction between these leadership roles, please start there. Speaking of which, suppose we reframe each of these roles by looking at how much influence you're expected to exert at each of these levels. I think things become a lot clearer once you start thinking of it in these terms, more specifically in terms of the sphere of minimum influence. I don't use minimum loosely here. If your culture is healthy, and you'll be able to influence upwards as far as you can imagine without ruffling any feathers. Again, this is contextual. It's not the same at every company, and some people like a hierarchy. That being said, at the various stages of your leadership career, you will be expected to have a minimum influence, right? So if you're a team lead, you'll likely lead a single team. If you're a dev manager, you might lead multiple teams. If you're a senior dev manager, you will probably lead multiple teams of teams. Essentially, then you are a lead of leads, right? Now, similarly, once you move into that VP or director or head role, you might be expected to manage multiple departments or disparate teams, right? For example, a head of product might lead a team of product designers as well as a team of UI and UX designers. And it's fairly common for a head of product to even lead a team of devs. And really, this has been critical to my career to wrap my head around the meaning of sphere of influence, right? And contrasting that against title. So title is often misleading. Title doesn't necessarily tell anybody what your specific role is. Influence isn't. So once you start moving into a leadership role, how will your role change, right? So the question everybody's going to ask you is, won't you miss dev? And your answer is probably going to be yes. And this was actually the biggest mental hurdle that I faced moving into leadership, because I absolutely love dev. Like I've been deving since we got the ZX Spectrum, so from the age of 6 or 7. I'm not the best dev, by the way. I'm competent at best. My current team will definitely tell you that. But I do still dev on hobby projects after hours. And that's kind of how I keep abreast of new things happening. But more than that, more than dev, I love being a voice for dev, and I love seeing people and companies grow and succeed. And so that's why me changing focus hasn't impacted my love of dev and the dev sphere as a whole. So the very first thing that's going to change is that you're going to have to flex those soft skills, right? You're going to be doing less coding. You're going to be doing more coaching. You're going to have to put your team first, and you're going to have to do all the talking. And that's something that no one really prepared me for either. So in general, when I say do less coding, I mean, this one is pretty obvious. Unless you plan on working 14-hour days, you're going to have to let go of that code base. I tried to do it once or twice. I do not recommend it. You will burn out personally, and more than likely you will burn your team as well. More coaching, that's individually and for your team as a whole. Remember when I said that one of the core responsibilities of that team lead role was alignment? So someone much smarter than me once said, every decision that you make, regardless of how big or small it is, changes the direction of the company. All right, so even something as simple as responding to a bug report outside of your actual sprint work, that impacts the time that you're spending on things outside of delivering value in your current sprint, which means that everything kind of has a cascading effect after that, and pushes out all of your deliverables, right? So at that point, you've changed the direction that your company is moving. So really, it is one of your primary goals as a team lead then is to make sure that your teams are aligned, right? You don't really want to start off in Cape Town only to have dev end up in Argentina and product in Russia. You'll definitely have a bad time. The third item on the list is put your team first. So your time is no longer just your own, right? You need, when the team needs something, you need to act on it. And then the very last point, all of the talking, you're going to be doing one-on-ones, you're going to have team meetings, you're going to have projects and product meetings, you're going to have performance feedback sessions, you're going to have career planning sessions, etc. There is going to be a lot of planning and talking in your future, regardless of the size of your team. It is as difficult to manage 3 people as it is to manage 6 people, as it is to manage 15 people. The best leaders I found gradually introduce their new leads to this whole world of leadership. It can be intimidating, especially if you haven't built up a soft skills tool chest yet. And when you're thinking of filling that tool chest, right, outside of finding a great mentor, just try to consume as much media as you can. There are tons of blogs and books and podcasts and talks about this specific skill set. There's no shortage of content out there. But ultimately, I think the biggest mindset change that you have to make is that you have to be prepared to fail, and you have to be honest about your failures with your team. Like if you're anything like me, empathy won't come naturally to you. It's a skill that you have to learn. And you'll need to be deliberate about practicing your soft skills every single day. All right, so what makes a good tech leader? Is it brains? Is it heart? Is it courage? Bonus to whoever gets the reference. I think you need to answer the following questions, right? So the first one is, are you a great dev? No, that's fine, neither am I. And don't worry, you don't need to be a great dev to be a great leader. I think you absolutely must be a competent dev first though, before you can become a competent leader. So when you first become a leader, you will be judged on your technical competency first and your people skills second. Now, as you grow into that role and your management style, your reports will start to judge you more harshly on the latter than the former. Sorry, I'm just going to check. Okay, I'll get to these questions a little bit later. Right, so at Snapscan, we've really tried hard to combat the Peter principle, and the Peter principle loosely stated says that every employee will rise through the ranks until they reach a level that they're incompetent at. Essentially, they will continue like failing forward until you move into a position that you're not qualified for or you aren't ready for. And if you worked in the industry for long enough, you'll have encountered a manager or lead who didn't quite tick all the boxes, right? And didn't give you what you needed out of your career. And so we encourage everybody who's performing at a level that we expect to take on responsibilities at a slightly higher level. within reason, obviously. And then obviously we also compensate accordingly for that. So, sorry, I'm just closing this window. The question is, do you have enough experience? And this is a bit of a more contentious one. So experience definitely plays a role. Often the older devs have a breadth of knowledge and have developed a higher level of empathy because they've experienced the ups and downs of the industry. But at the same time, experience can count against you because some devs learn to pattern match to such an extent that they cannot break out of their old learned habits. And so I think rigidity is as bad as not being opinionated enough. But on the other hand, I've worked with some incredibly talented young devs at all of the companies that I mentioned previously, who just grok empathy and they have the technical chops. And if your team has one of those unicorns, I think it's important that you cherish and nurture them because they will probably be your MVPs in the future, right? And to take that sporting analogy one step further, I love sports. If you're good enough and you have a solid support team, you're old enough, right? Again, just be prepared to fail and dust yourself off. And the very last question, I think, is, do you care about people and process? Now, if you're thinking about taking that step up, you absolutely must care about people and process. The right processes are integral to ensuring that your people perform at their best. And that's how you'll be spending the majority of your time in your new role. Incidentally, that's also how you'll be measured, right? So because you're not doing as much coding as before, you're going to be asked, are your people happy? Are they effective? Are they efficient? And if not, then you probably need to get feedback about your team and processes and then start tweaking whatever you're doing. Okay, now, if you've answered yes to at least 2 of these questions, congrats, you could be a team lead. It's obviously a bit more nuanced than that. But at the superficial level, those are really the only questions that you need to answer. Like it's just those 3 questions. Okay. Let's see. The next question is, what do developers really need and want? And I completely apologize for the slide. I wasn't going to include the GIF. And then one of our future team leads said that it's desperately calling out for a Spice Girls GIF. I 100% apologize. Okay, so a little bit of theory. So Edward Deci was a psychologist in the 70s, and he did some work on trying to figure out the differences between extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. Now, extrinsic motivation refers to rewards-driven behavior, right? So things like public praise, bonuses, extra paid leave, and these tend to be short-lived and sometimes are just one-off things. Now, they're great at getting short-term results because everybody likes getting a pat on the back. Everybody likes getting a little bit extra in their bank account at the end of the month. But there probably aren't things that will keep employees happy for a long time. Right? So on the other hand, intrinsic motivation refers to when you're driven by internal factors like personal or team growth, or to put it more concretely, seeing the value of your work when the user is delighted by something that you built for them. Now, Deci did a lot of work like trying to unravel the differences between these two. And while he was doing that, he discovered that money actually often isn't the best motivator. And this was in the 70s. It is important to note that money might not be the best motivator, but it might be the most important motivator depending on the person's circumstances, right? Again, everything is contextual. And you realize that I say that a lot because leadership is very fluffy. And we'll get into this a bit in the next slide. So now what if we combine the idea of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation into a single view, right? And that's exactly what the psychologist Maslow presented in the 40s, and that's the pyramid that you have right there. So it's a pyramid with 5 layers, and each layer is a need that needs to be satisfied. So the needs lower down in the hierarchy must be satisfied before the needs higher up can be attended to. An example of this is the lowest rung on that pyramid is solved by having enough money, right? So what enough is obviously up for debate, but let's consider the amount of money where you don't need to worry about any of your other needs being met, any of your physiological needs being met. Now, obviously, this is especially true in our society where this layer just isn't really being serviced for the greater part of our population. But let's just go through that pyramid very quickly. So if you simplify it from bottom to top, you have your basic needs. Now, your basic needs are things like food and clothing and job security. If you have those two, then you can start focusing on your psychological needs. And these might be friendship and recognition. So friendship, obviously, no man's an island. And also recognition. Everybody likes being told that they're doing something good, that they're doing a good job. And once you solve for your psychological needs, then you can start trying to satisfy your self-fulfillment needs. And this is where the personal growth piece comes into play. So I think most of these are self-explanatory. Now, this pyramid itself has been updated many times since the 40s to include tons more layers. I think the latest one has something like 8 or 9 layers. But the general idea still kind of holds, right? It's if your basic needs aren't met, you're not going to be able to attend to all of the other needs higher up in that pyramid, and that obviously has a knock-on effect with things like work and your personal life. Right. So we've determined now that money isn't the best motivator, but it's essential to servicing the lowest level of our needs, right? Now, what if we consider just the intrinsic motivators in the context of our workplaces? And so to this point, Dan Pink released a book called Drive, where he basically outlined 3 elements of intrinsic motivation. And those are, as the picture says, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Now, autonomy refers to self-direction, right? It's where we want to be able to make our own choices. And really, once you're in that team lead role, like what this requires is you giving your reports constructive feedback, giving them encouragement, giving them choice or agency. If they can't make their own decisions, how can they work autonomously? The second one is mastery. And mastery is basically our want to get better at the things that we do. And I see this all the time inside dev, where devs just aren't given the space and time and support to reach a little further every time. Right? A lot of companies, unfortunately, people clock in, pick up tickets, and then they clock out again. And to get the best out of your team and to develop your team to be the best that they can possibly be, they need to stretch a little bit further each time. And to do that, you need to give them space to fail, space to learn. It is a tough balancing act, but it can be done. And then the last one on the list is purpose. So purpose is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, right? You will only really tackle impossible problems if you care about the outcome. And so as a team lead, you really need to try to connect the team to something bigger than themselves, some higher purpose. Often in the fintech space, that is helping the unbanked. And everybody's trying to solve that problem. Well, pretty much every fintech locally. And that is a great thing to connect to, because you're making a tangible difference in people's lives. So interestingly, in 2018, Oricon, which is an advisory company, ran a survey with Gen Zers. So that's people who were born between 97 and 2015, and found that almost half of the respondents ranked serving a purpose and leaving a positive legacy for future generations as the most important. Right? Now, only 6.5% listed salary as their highest priority. Now, that's not to say that salary isn't in like the top 3, but it wasn't the highest. The other list of top priorities was rounded out by things like training and development, flexible working, and career progression. And I don't know about you, but I want to work at a place that offers all of these things. Okay, now let's turn our attention to a more recent study. So OfficeN released their State of the Nation report not too long ago. And as you can see there, this was the top 8 reasons why developers stay at the company. And so number 1 is growth. Number 2 is work-life balance, then culture, colleagues, future salary potential, current salary, tech stack, and great benefits. And as you can see, salary features pretty low on that list. And so I think Dan Pink's thesis and Oricon's study paints almost exactly the same picture as the State of the Nation report does. So I think old Dan might have been onto something. Now, finding out exactly what motivators drive each of your team members is very difficult. So it's not something, in general, when I onboard someone new, it's not something I generally talk about on the first day. I think it's worthwhile getting to know each of your people on a much deeper level, understanding who they are, where they come from, what makes them tick, And this takes time. There are no shortcuts. Okay, so we have all this information about what people want and what they need, but how do we action this? And how do we give it to them? So the most important tenet of being a leader, I think, is be human first. And this is the harshest lesson that lockdown has taught me. You cannot lead if you cannot empathize. Everyone was fighting invisible battles before lockdown when they could move around freely. But lockdown has basically amplified the severity of these battles 100-fold at least. So we've all lost loved ones, and some of us have been driven to the brink. And that's what I say, empathy first, always. I've seen it at Snapscan, I've seen it at previous companies, I've seen it in friends and family. If you cannot be human first, you cannot lead effectively. So a little checklist. As a dev, I do love checklists. So once you've realized that you need to be human first, I think it's also important to find a framework that works for you and your people, right? And so this one has worked for me. It's something that I've tried to apply at each of the places that I've worked at in a leadership role previously, and so far so good. So the checklist is essentially teamwork, transparency, delegation, and support. So looking at each of these in turn, teamwork. Like I found that the best teams foster a culture of support, trust, and knowledge sharing. Again, this doesn't just come naturally. Like each of the items on that list is exceptionally hard. But I think the teamwork piece is the hardest to solve, right? People are messy, and getting everyone to play nicely and effectively is hard at the best of times. Again, much like the previous slide, I don't think there are shortcuts here. Like culture doesn't happen accidentally. So if you've identified the kind of team you want to build, you have to practice what you preach on a daily basis. Transparency. The best teams have a recipe to kind of manage and prioritize things and make choices by themselves. So this needs to be part of your culture again, and it needs to be practiced daily. But on the flip side, you also need to be open and honest about the goings on at your company wherever possible, right? Especially around where you've had failures as a leadership team. It's not fair to expect people to understand the tactical decisions you've made when they are not in the loop and have no voice. And then delegation. You shouldn't expect to keep doing the work that you've been doing as a dev, obviously. You shouldn't expect to have time to manage the team and tech and get your hands dirty. Now, if you've built up trust in your team, right, share some of your duties where you can. If you run Scrum for your team, and some team leads do this, maybe coach the team into running some of the ceremonies themselves. Like if you're doing due diligence on some future work, break it into chunks and let your team handle it. Your people won't grow unless they try something out of their comfort zone, right? But again, to make it fair, you have to set expectations and you have to give feedback accordingly. You can't just throw work at people and then expect them to run with it and for everything to just run smoothly. And then the last piece on this one is support. So support takes many forms, but I think empathy is at the heart of all of it. I think regular catch-ups and feedback sessions are absolutely essential. Make it intentional, set agendas beforehand, take notes and action points, and then actually follow up on all of those things. And that also ties into building trust. And then one that I found that not enough dev houses do is to plan ahead and plot career paths for your teams. Devs aren't going to stay at the company forever. And so it's super important that you try to balance out their growth with meeting the needs of the company. And if you can do both, then it's a win-win. So absolutely make sure they get the necessary coaching and mentorship. And again, actually follow up on all of the things that you've promised and be intentional about it. Cool. So how do I get good at this? Good is relative. I'm not sure you can ever build a perfect environment, and I'm not sure you can ever become the perfect tech leader. But this is kind of my get good checklist. Get a mentor, consume media, and then just practice. Right? So ultimately, you need to find a leadership style that works for you, your team, and your company. And it's tough, like super tough. The last 7 years have been the toughest of my career, but also the most rewarding. And like I said, I've got to meet some amazing leaders along the way that have helped shape my framework for leadership. Now, the easiest way to get started is to consume as much media about leadership as you can, especially about tech leadership. It doesn't matter if it's books or podcasts or talks, just start somewhere and then consume the media and take notes. Like all of those notes go into your soft skills tool chest. Once you have some ideas, try them. Like, be intentional about your practice. Observe and get feedback from your peers and reports. Figure out what works and what doesn't. And aside to this one, grow thick skin as quickly as you can. The quicker you can bounce back from harsh and constructive criticism, the quicker you'll learn to adapt your approach, and you'll also be encouraging honest and frank discussions within your team. Again, working with highly talented devs, they are likely to be very opinionated, and sometimes the feedback can be very blunt, and that's good. That's definitely a good thing. You need to know where you stand with each of your reports. Now, if you're really lucky, you'll work with someone who can mentor you. Right now, if that option isn't available, look outside of your immediate environment. There are many initiatives where tech leads gather virtually now, obviously, to discuss the challenges they're facing and also to ask each other for help. I think the one sentiment you should take away from this talk is that no amount of reading or watching or listening is going to make you a better leader. Those activities will get you a set of tools which will equip you to handle the difficult situations better. They're vital to being a good leader, but you only get better by practicing every single day. And then just some personal favorites of mine. So the book Managing Humans by Michael Lopp, CTO Craft on YouTube has some great talks by some really good people. They're not all CTOs, by the way. There's a bunch of team leads, there's engineering managers, there's architects, some really great talks there. Any talk by Josh Evans. So he was one of the early hires of Netflix. He became senior VP of engineering, I think. He has some really great talks on YouTube, as well as Patrick Kruger. So Patrick is super young, very talented. He was the ex-CTO of N26. He's also, I think, written 4 or 5 books already. I think he's a little bit younger than me. Yeah, super smart guy. I'll also be sharing these slides afterwards, so no need to take notes on these. And then the last one, be intentional always. You won't accidentally become a good leader. I've been doing this for just over 7 years now, and I still learn new things every single day. And I absolutely love it. I would encourage you to adopt a learning mindset. You're never too old to learn new tricks. But the most important thing is just be intentional about everything you do. Now, assuming that you've moved into this new tech leadership role, what should you do in your first 60 days? And the secret is absolutely nothing. But hear me out. Do nothing but listen, follow, and build rapport. So you're going to feel like you need to start making changes right away, right? This is especially true if there's a big difference in culture and process between your previous roles and your current one. Don't follow that inclination. All you need to do is listen, follow, and build rapport. Now, if you're an unknown quantity, so if the team doesn't know you, then I would advise you to build trust first. And you don't build trust by kicking in the door, burning down the building, and then trying to rebuild it yourself. Figure out what your team's identity is, what the superpowers are, what the kryptonite is, and also what their blind spots are. They're called blind spots for a reason. And then figure out how you can help them. And your job is to uplift the team, not to boss them around. And unfortunately, like this is a failing that I've seen happen all too often. Like a new team lead, a new manager comes in, and the first thing they see is everything that's wrong with the current company and the current process. And then they try to change all of it at once. And that's the easiest way to lose trust. If you've lost that trust, it is incredibly hard to get it back. So what does all of this mean for Snapscan? So we try to, something has gone horribly wrong with my slide. So we try to balance our technical excellence with balancing a culture of belonging, purpose, and regular progression. Bear with me, this one is a bit of a mouthful. So Snapscan Engineering has had its eye on making room for the team to grow to its full potential from day one. So as an aside, I've only been with Snapscan for just shy of 2 years now. And a lot has changed since the first day. So if the team performs at its best, Snapscan wins, and everybody builds a launchpad for their careers too. And it's meant that we've had to evolve, and we've done so with purpose. So every single hire, every promotion was done intentionally. push each other to do better and be better. And the last 18 months has been testament to that. So we've actually hired most of our devs during lockdown. And we've managed to do that and then still build a close-knit family despite being very far apart. So I haven't even met some of the newbies in person yet. Now, again, I'm painting a pretty picture, but the truth is that we haven't always managed our process as well, or our people. And we've stumbled at times, many times, in fact. But we've learned, we've recognized our failures, and we've dusted ourselves off. And in doing that, I think we've managed to build something special. So how did we get here? And the whole point of this talk really is building up technical leadership at Snapscan was key. So if we look at this graph, you can see lots and lots of change over the last year and a half. The plan was high risk and high reward. So we were almost 2 years away from having all of the pieces in place for our various moves to make sense. So we've got an extensive roadmap. It's something bold that we're trying. And in 2019, when it was formulated, we only really had sign off for like 2 extra hires. And as you can see, in 2019, we had a total of 3 days. So by early 2020, the roadmap was extensive, and we identified the need to flesh out the dev department. And being in a senior leadership role, I couldn't zoom in and out all day, from looking at code to architecting things to managing the team to managing Xcode. And I knew we had to start building out a middle management layer for the department. So by mid-2020, we had made a few more hires, we identified potential leads inside the company, and we embarked on this journey, right? So actually train them up so that they could fill that purpose. By the end of 2020, we had hired a few more devs and an agile lead, not necessarily the same as a Scrum Master. We managed to find a great one, and no, you can't have it. And today we've grown to 15 devs. Now, normally that would flip your culture on its head, right? But by having smaller teams with more structure and agency, you make people want to be accountable, right? It's not my team, it's their team, it's their culture. And 2022, I think we're probably looking to almost double the size of the team again. So our roadmap is a mile long, getting longer with every partner that wants a piece of our tech. Who knows where we'll be 12 months from now? But I do know that Snapscan and every single dev year has a very exciting future ahead. So don't be a sucker. Don't be like me. Management does not make the most money, does not have the easiest job, and is definitely not the only job that is secure after 30. Thank you. Before we get into Q&A, I actually do have a few more slides, and these are slightly more personal. Since we do have a few minutes left, I actually want to just go through like what my tech career has looked like and the things that I've learned. So who gave me my start? And that's really tough to say because my career has been all over the place. I think I've worked at 8 different companies now. But to be honest, it all started with Yoko. So like I said at the beginning, I met Lungi at the UCT ICT incubator in 2003, a long time ago. And I actually stayed in digs with Katlego in my 2nd year. So I kind of knew them, right? So when they reached out to me, I forget which year it was. I was one of the early stage employees. The team was around 6 people at the time. And there wasn't really much to lead. There was a lot to build though. So shortly after getting some angel funding, we went on this hiring drive and we started building out a proper dev team. The team was still small and there were really no processes. So I started to do what I could from a team morale and hiring and strategic point of view. And I learned very quickly that if you wanted to get things done outside of the immediate scope of delivery, of actually building something, you had to do it yourself. No one was going to wait for you. No one was going to give you, no one was going to tell you what to do. So learning independence at Yoko, I think was definitely the starting point of me moving into this kind of leadership role. Then a few years later, Jumo came knocking. Now I worked with some fantastic leaders at Jumo. I mean, this was one of my, so my boss at Jumo is now actually an engineering manager at Spotify. One of the VP of engineering at Jumo was actually like ex-PayPal and ex-Magento. So I worked with some fantastic leaders at Jumo and learned some very hard truths very quickly. You cannot build the culture you want as an afterthought. Like, you must consider the end state before you start looking at anything. And this is also kind of where I earned my stripes about finding the right people to fit the culture that you want to build. Right. So, and that's both in preparing interviewers and preparing interviews and in actually interviewing. If you don't prep for your interviews as much as your interviewees do, then you're doing them a disservice, and yourself. The third one was, like I mentioned, was a company called Cape, and then it was purchased by HPE. And then we fell under this umbrella Aruba, like semi-startup company inside HPE. So eventually a friend reached out to me shortly after their startup had been acquired. And they were a small team at the time. I think the entire company was 8 people. And they wanted to scale, and they actually needed to scale because HPE saw the product that they had built as one of the key parts of their SD-WAN solution. And so my friend was looking for some technical managers who could help stabilize and grow the company. And so I joined them. And that was a wild ride. So we were hiring, we were putting internship programs in place, building the dev brand, putting out fires in DevOps on a daily basis, signing multi-million-dollar clients, and then just like building ad hoc things for people who are shouting loudly. And then we were also interfacing with teams in Bangalore and Santa Clara, often with both teams at the same time. So your days would regularly start at like 7 a.m. and end at 10 p.m. Wasn't the most sustainable gig. See my earlier slide about burning out, but definitely one that accelerated my learning just by exposing me to everything, all the way up to Exco again. And so we come to Snapscan. So Snapscan has been a bit of a reboot for me. Like we've started this journey mostly from scratch. The company was super small, and like I said, the dev team was a total of 3 people when I joined. So we've tried to be sustainable, and we've tried to build something sustainably and also build something trustworthy. And the secret ingredient I think that we found is that you just need to be human first. And that is it.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Kurt. So we have a couple of questions, and I'd love to know from your side, how do you balance people against process?
So Jeffrey, thanks for the question. I think we are missing a little piece of context here, but in general, I don't see the two as being completely separate. Like I see people feeding into process and process feeding back into people. I think you definitely need to be sensible in terms of how much process you introduce. You definitely don't want to add too much process all at once. Like I think the best way to approach it is to tweak something small, let it play out, see how well it's working, get feedback, and then tweak it again until you find something that just works completely for your team.
Awesome. And then I see Luigi also asked, how easy has it been as a developer to gain these soft skills?
Good question, Luigi. Very, very difficult for me. Like I said, like empathy doesn't come naturally to me. And I think that's a product of my upbringing and just the state of the working environment when I joined the workforce. So like I said, it's been very intentional from my side. I've tried to speak to people who are in leadership positions. I've tried to get mentorship from them. I've consumed just about every book I could find on leadership, podcasts, blogs. There's some great talks on YouTube about all of this stuff. Take notes, and then just like I said, just practice every day. Like it's going to take a while to get used to it. It's taken me, like I said, it's taken me 7 years to reach a place of comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such awesome advice. And Francois asked, how much support is enough? And what do you do with team members who need hand-holding all the time?
That's a tough one, Francois. And I think different companies deal with it very differently. So if I look back at my time at Jumo, like we were super strict about the probation periods. Probably oftentimes a bit too strict. So candidates that needed a lot of hand-holding would get monthly feedback, and if they just couldn't make good enough progress, then unfortunately, like we'd often have to cut them at the end of probation. But in general, if somebody is past probation and they've shown that they can do things and just need a little bit of extra help, you have different options. So one of the things we're trialing at the moment is somebody's moving from an ops role into a DevOps role. And so they don't have that DevOps background. And so they do need a lot of handholding. And that's fine. I think you just need to be open and honest with them. I think in terms of support, look at things outside of the company as well, because you can't dedicate all of your company resources to them. So what we've done is we've actually gone with one of the cloud learning services to put them on a training plan to get them to where they need to be. And then we'll also have regular check-ins on just to see where they are and what kind of blockers they have. And then internally, we can look at how we can address those.
Thanks so much. And then Wayne wanted to know, do you make good decisions? And I'm assuming, how do you know?
Wayne, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I like to think I make reasonable decisions. I think good is much like a painting is in the eye of the beholder. Again, like I think it depends on the context, right? So I think my role is slightly different from the general team lead role in the sense that I generally provide the vision and not the implementation details, right? So I'll try to sell the team on the vision, and then it's up to the team to action things. Right, so I try to give them as much autonomy as possible. So I think as a team lead, it might be different. In my role, I think I'm making okay decisions. I haven't been fired yet, so that's a good thing.
And then one last question. It's about to know, what's a point of friction that stands out for you from your own transition from developer to lead?
Biggest point of friction is wanting to stay hands-on. I think, again, depends on the context. So some companies do expect a bit more dev from their team leads, but that's probably the biggest thing the hardest thing that you're going to face trying to transition from dev to lead is letting go of the code. I think it's fine to still do PRs, to still mentor in that way, but like getting stuck in the code all the time is, I think, is probably a bad option, because it means you're not looking at the health and well-being of the team and the alignment of the team to other teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us. All right. So
thanks, everyone.
Well, all right. So Wayne's responded, my apologies. It's letting go of self-interest is harder than letting go of the code for him. So Wayne is our CTO, actually. So that was, it's a very cool comment. Thank you so much, Wayne. Guys, thank you for sharing and for asking. We'll answer the rest of the questions virtually. I'm going to hand over to Rory now, and we're going to dig into Azure a little bit.
Okay, so now we do the little bit of the dance. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see my screen? And welcome, everyone. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been at Darrow. I think I hosted the Josie Jug there once or twice. Kurt, really great talk. I love how calm you are and how hyperactive I am. So it's a big, nice juxtaposition between our two talks that we're about to do now. So I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour on everything on Java and Azure with some live demos that might or might not work. And then we're going to see some new changes with Visual Studio Code. Very proud to work with the Visual Studio Code team to bring a really enhanced experience with Java. Okay, so let's go. I've got my little clicker and let us start. So who am I? I am a developer advocate for a small startup out of Seattle. I don't know if you've heard about them, called Microsoft. They only have 160,000 people. And I've been changing the belly of the beast because I'm a Java developer advocate for Microsoft. I know. And I work on a Mac and I'm on Zoom. So the irony is really not lost on me. I'm also a co-author for this incredibly fantastic little endeavor that Microsoft's been doing. And we've been creating Java documentation. So aka.ms/java-learn-path. It will be at the end of the slide deck. Also, you can, it's not Snapscan, but you can barcode snap that there. And it gives you 14 learn modules that take you through from 0 to hero on Java on Azure. You can also follow me on Twitter. at Rory Preddy. So a little bit about Java on Azure. So we have a really strong partner ecosystem. Most of my days is actually dealing with partners, getting them to test the systems, look at the systems. We've got VMware, Red Hat, Oracle, IBM, Redis, Elastic, Confluent, Azure, so many different partners that we partner with to get a really fantastic experience on Azure. But we do more than that. We also have huge community engagement. One of the founding members for a lot of these engagements. We're a member of the Eclipse Foundation. We have a membership in Open Jdk, not only, but today, as part of Microsoft Build, we launched the general availability for the Microsoft build of Open Jdk. I'm going to show you a demo a little bit later there. That means that we have a supported platform of Open Jdk in Java. We're also a founding member of Adoptium, a strong partnership with Spring. I'm going to do a Spring demo today. We own GitHub. We liked it so much we bought it. We have a really huge interest in Visual Studio Code. And then obviously we have support for other Java standards and projects. Don't worry, it's not that many slides here. I'm going to do like 5 to 10 minutes of slides and then a nice little demo. So Java is widely used in Microsoft. How widely? Internally, that means not our customer workloads. We have 500,000 Java virtual machines in production. That's not dev test live, in production. We have them in LinkedIn, in Azure, on Yammer, in Minecraft, on Android. So we have a huge, heavy investment in Java at Microsoft, and it shows. And it makes sense then for us to heavily invest in the ecosystem to make it a wondrous experience for our developers to use Java on Azure. So the first thing I want to tell you is that it's easy to get to Azure, but you first have to understand the journey that you're doing to get to there. And one of the things that we speak to them about is modernizing Java applications on Azure. So important to understand is migration. So you take your VMs with your proprietary platforms there, and you move it over to the cloud, and that's called migration. Modernization is making it cloud native. I think that was a buzzword about 2 years ago. And there's frameworks, and then you can choose a plethora of frameworks. One of them is Red Hat JBoss Enterprise Platform. We've just launched that. Some real updated VMs now. We've got Oracle VMs, IBM WebSphere, Wildflower, and then also we have multiple frameworks that you can actually use on Azure. Then once you decide on your framework, then you do infrastructure as a service, container platform as a service, or platform as a service, or the new buzzword, managed platform as a service. So infrastructure service, your virtual machines, container platform as a service, Kubernetes, Red Hat OpenShift, which is a white labeling of Kubernetes. And then platform as a service, you've got your Azure App Service, so your Java Standard Edition, your Tomcat, and then your JBoss EAP on Azure App Service. And then you have your managed platform, which is Azure App Service, which sits on top of Kubernetes, which actually is, when you think about it, a nice way, an abstraction of Kubernetes to say, I've got my Spring services, I want to manage the lifecycle, I don't want to have to worry about the Kubernetes control plane, and I just want to be able to develop my systems, which is the Azure Spring Cloud. Once you decide on that, then you can choose your database of choice, and we have so many of those. We have Azure database for Postgres, MySQL, Cosmos, which is NoSQL, Redis, and SQL Server. And most of those databases also allow you to have a free tier, a flexible tier, a multi-tenant tier. It's pretty impressive when you look at how many different database options you can get. So let's look at using containers. So you've got your development tools that you can choose here, and we partner with JetBrains for IntelliJ, Docker, Build Tools, GitHub, and then you can use your container registry. And you've got your container platform as a service. Now we've got Azure Kubernetes, we've got OpenShift, and then you've got your container instances, which is our original rendition of that. And basically that is the running, if you remember, Service Fabric, that's running Service Fabric. You wonder where it went. And then you've got all your platform services that you can actually engage. And we've just launched now Azure Arc for Kubernetes, which means that you can run your Azure Kubernetes services. You can tie into AWS's Kubernetes services running on-prem, and it will be seamless for you to do that. And it was launched today, actually, Azure Arc for Kubernetes, that you can tie into all of those services in your Kubernetes cluster. If you want to run Tomcat or JBoss EAP, we have all of those. You can run a WAR or an EAR, built-in CI/CD migration for zero downtime deployments. Try to say that fast. So we have optimization and performance, and then we have obviously automatic updates and security patches. Now that is JBoss EAP on Azure App Service, which basically means you get the whole JBoss server, but you treat it as kind of like a Tomcat service. I've been doing a lot of talks around that, and it's pretty breathtaking because it also gives you the ability to load balance and also auto scale on your JBoss services. But we're here also to talk about Azure Spring Cloud. So it's a fully managed infrastructure. You don't have to really manage any of the servers. You're not even aware of the servers. You've got built-in app lifecycle management, and it also uses something called dev containers to build up your containers and then slice it for you using build packs. I don't know if you're aware of build packs. So build packs analyzes using AI your containers. So as you publish the Spring repository, it will go in and say you need that, and with build packs, it'll chuck it to your Azure Spring Cloud instance there. And then ease of monitoring. We've got, and I will show you here, we've got Agentless Monitoring, and it was just launched yesterday for Azure App Service also to have Agentless Monitoring for distributed tracing. Also try to say that fast. So you've got your databases here. We've got our in-memory and then also our relational databases. And then we can also handle events. So we've got event hubs, function apps, and tied into Cosmos DB. And this really allows us to we'll focus on mobile and event-driven architectures and devices and IoT. Important, it didn't go anywhere. Remember that buzzword about 2 years ago? We still need to ingest IoT data, process it in your function app, and then chuck it into a NoSQL database, and then visualize the data in Power BI or Azure SQL. Once you've got all of that, you can build on your own terms. So we integrate and we partner with IntelliJ, Eclipse, Visual Studio Code. We also provide automation tools for Java developers in Maven. And recently, I'm going to show you a demo in Gradle. Super fast and super elegant way to actually do that in build with Gradle, GitHub, and Jenkins, and Terraform. So you've got your building there, and then your automation, Terraform, ARM, CLI. You can use Gradle and Maven for your building. Deploy, you can use Azure Pipelines, GitHub Actions. I'm going to show you a little bit later with the GitHub Action demo, your CLI, and then Pipelines and Jenkins for to tie it all in together. So that's all the slides I want to show you today. Got a nice little demo that we're coming up. I'm going to roll up my sleeves here. You can access all of those demos also on aka.ms/Java-learn path, and then Snapscan the image there. So let's get out of PowerPoint here. So the first thing I want to show you is you can go download, let's go into there. You can go download the Microsoft version of JDK. It's available today. It was launched today. And the Microsoft Open Jdk there, you can download the version 11. Let's go download here. And you can download the version of 11 and also 16. Now I've got it running right now. So if I go Java --version, then you'll see that I'm running the Microsoft Open Jdk. So, which is great. So now I can demo with great confidence that you're going to use it from now on. And it's also got container instances. We just launched it today. All container services you can run in your Kubernetes clusters and everything with the Microsoft version of Open Jdk. And it comes also with bundled support. And also we patch it to run on cloud, which is an important concept because a lot of times these Open Jdk instances aren't really hyper performant for cloud. So the demo I'm going to show you today is going to take you through some Visual Studio Code new features, and then I'm going to show you the how to get to Azure App Services, and then I'm going to show you Azure Spring Cloud, and if we've got time, Devops Starters with code spaces. So okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to git clone a repository. So let's go into here. I'm going to go into my dev folder, and I'm going to make mkdir and Dariel, cd Dariel, and let's go in and clone the Spring Pet Clinic application. So if you don't know the Spring Pet Clinic application, let's find that there. The Spring Pet Clinic application is just a nice little application that stores customers and then veterinarians, and then allows you to do veterinarian visits. And that veterinarian visit, you can actually click on there. If you hear my kids or my dogs, well, I am home, so it's planned to stay home. So yeah, sorry about that. So you can go add visits there. And this runs in a very standalone process here. And we're going to see how you can do that into Azure App Service. So let me go back here. So I'm going to go git clone, and I'm going to clone Spring Pet Clinic. So it's cloning there. And then we go cd Spring Pet Clinic, and we go code dot, and this is the latest version of the Java coding pack or Visual Studio. So it's a bunch of extensions here. And you'll see there that immediately when I do this, it's going to go activate the extension. And if I go into my source folders and I click on any Java file here, so we can go into that file there, the Spring Pet Clinic there, it's going to activate the extension, and then it's going to open up the Java little language server that sits out of process. It breaks, and it's not my problem because it's actually sending JSON back into Visual Studio Code. Every second that I type in, when I click on there, the mouse over, it's sending JSON to and from and back. So I can click on that, and then it will see there starting Java language server and where it gets the language server. And you can see there that I set up those language servers. And this was great in the day because this is JSON and no one wants to do configuration in JSON. I can go into the new window that we've just launched here, so view command palette, and now we have a configure runtime command palette. So you can set up your project JDKs, install a JDK, and you can see there we've got the Microsoft build of Open Jdk. You can set your tuning runtimes for your language server, and also you can see I've got all of the scan here, so it'll set the path there. So you can run everything from your configuration of your Java runtime. We also have a getting started screen that allows you to look at some nice tutorials and also a few other nice screens if you want to rummage through the new screen. So let's look at our Pet Clinic application. So the first thing that you're going to see here is this is the file view. And we don't want file view, we want a project view. So just released now, we've got a Java project view, and it gives you the project view in your source main. It also gives you your Maven dependencies and also your Jerry system libraries. And that's really new there, Java projects. You can go there and try that out though. So we've got the project view. Now let's look at some new features that we've got here for type hierarchy. So if I go into vet and I look at vet, which is a human being, extends person, right? Now, normally if I right click on vet and go show type hierarchy, it's going to just give you nothing. Now we've got a screen here that's going to show the type hierarchy, vet extends person, base entry, and it gives you the interfaces just like a kind of IntelliJ kind of feel. So that's great. But Rory, what happens if I go and change the hierarchy? So I've got speciality here. Now if I click on speciality extends named entity, which is a JP entity, and I can drag speciality and I'm going to drag it into owner. Now, what do you think is going to happen here? So I'm going to drag it here. It's going to say, do you want to move? Yeah, I want to move. Now it's going to give me a refactoring screen. I'm going to go show preview. And now you can preview, and it's going to change everything that would actually reference speciality. And I can go, yes, thank you. I really want you to change that. Now speciality is there, and it just works. And if I want to go change it back, which is great for working in teams, I can go in and drag speciality back into vet, show the preview. Yes, I want to move it back. Now, if I go into source control, I should see no changes. So let's go and wait for source control just to get that. And source control shows no changes. Moved it back, moved it forward, and now I have refactored. Great for teams, and huge improvement that we've done with the test auto refactoring. Maven Lifecycles, we've also got a screen here for Maven Lifecycle here. So if you go into your Maven screen here, we've upgraded all of the Maven Lifecycle, so you can get all of that, and you can just go, okay, cool, let me run a install straight from your IDE here, and it'll run that with your Maven Lifecycle. So we've got Maven Lifecycle. What about Test Explorer? Anything new in Test Explorer? So yeah, let's go into testing here. And you'll see here that we've got all the Spring testing tools here. So you can actually, and this is pretty new also, run these here. But if you go into here, you can see here I've got test here. But I can also go, if I go, let's go refactor. I want to go source action. and then I want to go generate tests, and I can generate all my tests. So tests before each and everything like that. So great to actually run your tests. Or you can run individual tests there, or you can actually run each test by test. And you can run the test there, and you'll see there, it's going to run the test there, bring it out in there, and Bob's your uncle. I actually don't think Bob is my uncle, but you can run all of those tests there. So it's great. It's a full-fledged IDE experience, even though it's a code editor. So the next thing I want to show you, and we've just launched this also. So if I go into the test here, so let's go into Test Explorer, and I go into my test find all here, and I click on vets find all, and I click that. Let's go vets find all. I can also debug the test, and it should actually debug and stop there. But what you don't realize is that it's got inline variables that we've just added as part of, let's see, did you run it? Yeah, there we go. And you can see that I've got inline variables, just like a full-fledged IDE. So I can inline variables, and then my variables, my local here, I can also right-click and go show as hex, show qualified name, static variables, disable logical structure, and two-string object view. So all new changes around that, inline variables, and also to be able to change the verbosity of that though. So that is the Test Explorer. Let's look at the final one, and this is usually a paid-for feature in IDEs. We have a Spring dashboard. It scanned my entire project for my Spring dashboard, and then it picks up the controller there, and I can just start it up. I can just start up my Spring services here, and very few, if any, IDEs actually have that kind of context awareness of Spring to be able to run, and you can see there it's running my Spring dashboard. Okay, stop that there. So those are all the new changes in Visual Studio Code. I just gave you a rundown of everything, but we've got one more thing. What about Azure? So if I go into my application here, and I right-click here, you'll see here on the clinic here, I can right-click and I can go deploy to web app, and it will say which web app do you want. I've logged into my Azure App Service here. It's going to scan in all my services here. I've already created a web app there, recently used here. But one little caveat is that it's going to try and deploy it with root.jar. So I've got a little project here that I have actually named my deployment structure into app.jar. So let's go File, Open Recent, and I want to go here, and you'll see here now if I right click here, so this is actually, if you go into the VS Code here, you'll see on the settings.json, I actually called it, please take the app.jar and target there. You can right click in here and just go deploy to Azure App Service, and it will deploy or create your Azure App Service. You can use a Maven plugin and it will deploy it there. And then what you're left with there is that you've got this application here. And you can see this is the application that I deployed there before, and I can just right click there on that and go deploy to web app. So that's great, but we came here for microservices. So the Spring app that I've got, let's chuck it into Azure Spring Cloud. So I've got Open Recent, and then I've got the Spring microservice application. We're still great for time here. And I've got now my owner services are actually built into different services here. And this is in the repo. You can go in and create everything yourself. Let me just show you here. And that is the Microsoft Azure Samples. So at github.com, Azure-Samples, Spring-Peclinic-Microservices. So I've deployed this already into Azure Spring Cloud. And there's a nice little extension we've created just for Azure Spring Cloud. So I've got functions, storage, virtual machines, database, and then Azure Spring Cloud here. And you can see here that I've got all of my services here, the owner service, the vet service, all of those services here. And I can right click on these services and go scale out, because it's a Kubernetes cluster. I can go scale in. I can auto scale it also, or I can just right click and go, it's got an API gateway, access public endpoints. And then that'll take me to my Azure Spring Cloud instance here. And then I've got my owner services here. I can go look for my owners. And this took quickly. How quick did that take? So I can go into Harold Davis and check all these services here. But then I can go into my end-to-end transaction mappings and distributed tracing. So I'm going to go into my portal here, into my Azure Spring Cloud instances here. So Azure Spring Cloud, and I've called this Spring Cloud RPZA. And I want to see how long did the owner services take to run. So I've got my application insights. And my application insights has an application map. This is enabled by default and doesn't cost a cent actually extra for Azure Spring Cloud. So I've got the last hour here. You can see all these services here. I've got the admin service, vet service, visit service, API gateway, and then customer service. You can click on customer service here. And now it's going to give me my performance, investigate performance. So you can go investigate performance. And then it will give you the tracing. So we can see here we had a spike. What is the spike here that we experienced? Oh, let's go back. I want to go let's go the last hour. Yes, apply. And then you can see here, it's got actuator health. And if I go dependencies, now I can see the database. So I want to go, okay, cool. Give me everything for the last 24 hours. I want to show you some database services here. And then you can click on the database services here. You can go into the samples. You can see exactly what happened there. But you can also go to the end-to-end transaction details. And that will show you the end-to-end transaction details. But I want to see the end-to-end transaction details for my customer service holistically. So I can go here, and then I want to go transaction search here. So let's go application insights, and then I want to go transaction search. Where are you? Transaction search. And then I go into see data in the last 24 hours. And you can get all your transaction certs here and your performance for that. Now, once you have all of those dependencies, you can see here, some were very quick, but some were a little bit long. And you eventually can find the one that is the REST call. And I do have it set up here already. So you can see the REST call here. And you can get the REST call for the transaction service here, owner service, find all. And it'll show you all of the different database settings here, the database actual commands, how long it took, the dependencies. So you can see there, took about 1 millisecond, but the first one there to get all the pets and the owners took 1.6 milliseconds. I can optimize that. And the owners also took 100 milliseconds. So you can get all of that transaction distributed tracing agentless. And we just launched the same service for this as Azure Spring Cloud for all of the app services today. We had Microsoft Build, and it was a really great time to be a developer with Microsoft Build. So the final thing I want to show you here, if I go into portal on Azure, is the new Devops Starters here. So the Devops Starters, they run Gradle, and it means that you use GitHub Actions. You get Spring Boot, .NET, PHP, anything that you want from Devops Starters here. You can go Devops Starters. And I've got the Daryl RPZA one here. You can just go create. I've already got one created, but I'm going to show you the one that is already run. We've got a few more minutes to run this here. So you can go in here and you can click on Java and Spring, and then Linux web app or container services, and then just go create. And it's just going to say authorize to your GitHub account, and it's going to go create a GitHub action and a repository for you there. And I'm going to call this Daryl again, and then we go review and create, and it's done. You've got an entire CI/CD platform here. We go into our GitHub repo here, so github.com and here. And I've already created one prior to this, so your repositories. So I've created the Daryl, let's go RPZA, so 3 hours ago. And you've got your ARM templates, and that deploys that with a GitHub Actions. You can see there's my GitHub Actions here, the Dev Starter workflow. So that's everything that you need here. And then my action ran 3 hours ago, so adding workflow file. And that's, you can see their build application source. And this is all built in there, deploy to Azure App Service, run your functional tests. That's great and everything, but I can actually code this all on Codespaces if I want to do that entire application. I can go open with Codespaces, and internal. I am a Microsoft employee, so we get some really nice toys that might come to you. And I've got an extreme Linux version here, which is 32 CPUs, 64 gigabytes of RAM with a GPU. So I can go create the code space here. It'll open in the code space. I can run it locally also. You'll see there it pops up. I can run the code space locally on my Visual Studio Code. So I can run that in the cloud, but pop everything down through here. So this is an entire instance running 32 CPUs and 64 gigabytes of RAM, and done. Now I can actually go into my application and go into the source file here, and I'm going to change the index.html to say, hello, Daryl. Let's go to resource file. It's going to trigger that application there that we saw. So index.html here, and I'm going to go hello, Daryl, and it'll take about 3 minutes to run. Hello, Daryl, and cool. And then I'm going to go into my source repository here, and I'm going to go Daryl. Let's just spell that, Daryl, and then done. And now if we go back into my Daryl, where were we? The DevOps starters here. You will see here that our DevOps starter, the Daryl RPZA, is going to trigger here with the actual Git commit saying, hello, Daryl. Takes about 2 to 3 minutes. By the time we are finished the Q&As, it should actually be there. And we did everything in code spaces with 32 gigs, 32 CPUs, and also we definitely, oh, did I push that? Oh, I did not push, hey? Always remember to push and push. Yes, always remember to push. So let's see if it triggers here. So let's go refresh. And then I remember I did this in like literally 3 steps, the Devops Starters here, and then you get GitHub Actions and all of the associated niceties, and runs Gradle, so it's super fast. There we go. Okay, let's take questions, and by the time we finish, it will be ready.
Right. Sure, that is running at the speed of light. So I think we all want to know, where does the pointer come from? That is such a cool pointer.
This is a Logitech presenter called the, no, but this is even more important. Sorry, we're completely digressing. This is called Spotlight. So Logitech Spotlight, I can actually switch on the, not a laser pointer, but I can go highlight. So if you're seeing my screen right now, I'm going to switch off that, and now I've got my screen. Now I can do this.
Oh.
And it's accelerometer, so I can actually stand up and do that. It's got a range of about 200 meters, and you can also plug into USB, but it's all Bluetooth there. It was my midlife, my pandemic crisis port. And then I've got my Magic Mouse here, and also my second hand here uses a touchpad, so I can go like Minority Report with my, pretty.
Okay, that's pretty flippin' awesome. And then Mandla wanted to know, for the Maven Lifecycle, does it still use the Maven wrapper?
We do. It's just because, like, for example, we tried it recently for Gradle 7. It just broke. So you'll see here, we're actually going build with Gradle for 5.6 because Gradle 7 kind of broke everything. But look at the speed that we get here. Build with Gradle, 29 seconds. Do you know that took up to 5 minutes before? And this now took 29 seconds. And that's the the routing that it does with Gradle. And you go from a build process with the Devops Starters that took anything up to 15 minutes to, well, we saw here, took about, how long did that take? Let's go back here. Let's go, here we are. It takes about a minute now.
That is absolutely insane. Does anyone else have something they wanted to throw in here while we give our system a minute? Right.
I actually want. I really want that end point where it says "Hello, Daryl," but we might not. Let's see if we.
That's awesome. It's actually such a cool thing to look at. So I think from my side, I'd love to know, what is sort of the response rate been with you guys releasing this? How are people receiving it?
The Open Jdk, the Devops Starters, or the Visual Studio Code changes?
A little bit of all of them.
Everyone loves Visual Studio Code. Every time I mention Visual Studio Code, they love it. It's free. It's so incredibly powerful. Now with code spaces, you saw how easy that was to spin up a 32 CPU, 64 gigabyte. It's coming soon. I can't say when, but it is coming really soon. I've been speaking to the team. So yeah, it's coming there, and it's cheap as hell. To run the whole day development, it's like dollars.
Jeez.
Like $1 or $2 for the whole day.
You have to put us on the list and give us a little reminder when things come through. That's awesome.
Okay, so and then the Devops Starters are really brand new, also about 3 weeks old. And the Gradle services there, I helped the team test it though. And so you can get started on Azure with the Devops Starters. But there's not only Java, there's .NET, there's Ruby on Rails, there's anything you want to start, and it all use GitHub Actions. So you can get your GitHub Actions there. And then obviously with that Learn Path, I have an entire session on Terraform with GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, running Jakarta applications, IntelliJ, everything's there. You get points, you get bragging rights, and with Microsoft Build, we also had a Cloud Skills Challenge that you could win one-on-one mentorship with Donovan Brown and some of my other colleagues. So it's a great opportunity, and we are finished. So let me check. It's running the functional test, which is actually Chromium in GitHub Actions. You can see they're running the functional test. Let's just see here for that nicety of that hello Daryl kind of feel. Where were we here for a second? I want there. So I want, let's see that. Yeah, that's that one. Done. Hello, Daryl. And we are finished. Thank you, Annan. Thank you, Kurt. And yeah, glass ceiling broken. And see you all on the Twitter spheres on @Rory Preddy. And you can also follow me. The last screen here is aka.ms/java-learn-path. Dear to me because I did co-author it. So yeah, please have a go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rory. We'll also share all of this after the session. Thank you so much, guys, for all of your time, for sitting in with us. If you have other questions, also be sure to leave us a comment, and we'll be releasing this in a little bit as well. So thank you again to our speakers. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys very shortly. And bye for now.